CCP nationalism is like a virus, and it makes people act crazy. They're spam calling Japanese restaurants. Welcome to China Insider, I'm David Zhang. Following the release of water from Fukushima, China's nationalistic people have done everything they can to harass Japan. From boycotting Japanese products to harassing Japanese people with phone calls, some of it gets really extreme. First of all, China releases nuclear water with 10 times more concentration for the radioactive tritium than Japan's Fukushima. But the CCP has been ignoring facts and only using feelings to stir chaos. Now, the fact is that the water released by Fukushima is filtered through the ALPS system, and it is safe to release. And this video here is now making rounds online. A Chinese TikToker living in Japan called the police on a restaurant because of this sign. And this sign here reads, "Dear Chinese people, our shop uses products from Fukushima." And now this isn't offensive at all. It just means that they're telling the truth. All of their seafood product comes from Fukushima. But police arrived, and this TikToker is acting like he just got discriminated against by a sign. One of the police tried to explain to him that this is not racist to state where the food is.
やっぱりそうですね。要は中国人に対してっていうあれじゃなくて、ここに来る方のために、要は福島県産のものを使ってるから、もしそもそも入る前の段階として、だから嫌なんだったらそもそもうちには入らないでくださいね。
中国人としてこれは国籍差別につながると思いますよ。
何がつながる？
中国なぜ中国
さんの嫌がる方がいらっしゃるから、そういう人たちのためにここのお店自体は福島県産の。
ご本人が喋ったなぜ中国人へ？
特にニュースで最近そういう風になってるんでこういう風に書いて
それは国籍差別なんですよ。
いや差別じゃないです。勝手なもうここはお店の経営者の判断権利があってやってることなので、警察がこれこんな書きゃダメだっていうのはできないんで。ですけどお話聞いたらこれ日替わりで結構書いてること変わるらしいんで、また明日には書くこと。
I mean, obviously, because only the brainwashed Chinese people are making a big fuss about Fukushima. And of course, the shop owner then changed the sign, but he says this at the end.
如果在国外，当你认为你自己被歧视，让你感觉到不舒服的时候，一定要勇敢地站出来反击啊！我们要用正当的权利去解决我们的诉求啊！每一个人都应该得到尊重。
That's funny. Now try doing that exact same thing, the so-called fighting for justice in China. Let's see if we will ever hear from you again. Their own logical flaws, right? It's like textbook CCP behavior. Blame others, and they of course did the same with the COVID origin, blaming Italy, blaming the United States. Anything but themselves. And this video, this vicious-looking eye person, honestly, I think he's just trying to score some nationalistic points with his TikTok fans. But still, you know, back in 2011, even the Chinese premier at the time went to Fukushima and tasted the fruit there, and he said it was delicious. So that's like slapping the faces of all the pro-CCP people out there. Not only that, this whole anti-Japanese thing has escalated into an information and narrative warfare. And the CCP ignored the entire process of why Japan is releasing the water in the first place. Now, Japan, following the Fukushima nuclear disaster in 2011, which was caused by earthquakes and tsunami, kept a large amount of water for 12 years. And that is the half-life decay of tritium, which is a radioactive material. And that water was used to cool the melting nuclear cores. And back in 2011, workers and emergency staff were willing to sacrifice their own lives to prevent a nuclear disaster from happening. And that water was mixed with the reactor core. And of course, it was contaminated with nuclear radioactive materials. But since then, the water has gone through the filtration system known as ALPS. And everything except for tritium has been filtered through. And it was kept away for, like I said, 12 years until now to be released because it is now deemed to do so safely. And what the CCP is telling you is only the first part, which is the water that went into the nuclear core, but it skipped the second part, which is that it went through a series of filtration and now it is safe to release. So they just call it nuclear wastewater. When in reality, after filtration, it's similar to a regular cooling water that has not mixed with the nuclear reactor core. And so, of course, it's safe. Now, to challenge the CCP's false narrative, here is the Australian embassy staff in Japan shopping for fruits from Fukushima. They seem very happy. And here is the Japanese Prime Minister eating fish from areas around Fukushima. Again, it looks pretty delicious to me. I want to go to Japan and eat some. According to Reuters, this week the South Korean president also had Fukushima fish for lunch. And last week, the US ambassador to Japan stated that he would also be eating fish from Fukushima.
The economic coercion against Japan, the robocalls of harassment and disinformation both here in Japan and around, comes right out of China's playbook. This is all politics. If President Xi has confidence in all the fish that comes from China near their nuclear plants, when Putin comes to visit, he can take him for a meal there.
I'm honestly kind of mad right now because of the low-level communist brainwashing logic that some of the comments I get and others have been getting. Like this one here says, if the Fukushima water is safe, why not drink it? Okay, do you drink bath water? Do you drink your dishwater? Like, do you drink water you flush toilet with? These are just two entirely different concepts, right? Drinking water and water that's used for utility and otherwise. Heck, the Fukushima water has a much higher standard than average levels for the WHO drinking water. And these Chinese people who use extreme CCP logic without even thinking just straight up says the stupidest things. Like one man in Japan even went to the beaches in Fukushima to personally take a swim just to show that they are safe and that he's showing solidarity against the CCP. If anything, I'd rather drink Fukushima water than China's heavily polluted water. I'm honestly ashamed because China's rich culture and traditional Confucian values, they've been all destroyed systematically by the Chinese Communist Party. The Japanese and the Korean people have preserved it better than the Chinese. And the CCP has ruined the reputation of Chinese people worldwide. So that's why I always say you can't judge the Chinese people based on what the CCP's been doing, and that China is not represented by the CCP. Instead of a traditional proud group of people, now we're viewed as gutter oil eating, low virtue people. I mean, I grew up knowing who to hate. I hate the Japanese, hated the imperialists in America, and that's why the CCP is the biggest evil in the world. They educate the young kids to have so much hate to begin with.
我来告诉人能在此地将活活饿死，是日本人拿中国脑袋实验出来的。人体的含水量占78%，是日本人拿中国女人在火炉里烤蛋实验出来的。肉怎么做最快，是日本人拿中国小女孩实验出来的。惨无人道，无恶不作，现在用生命换当下和平。
And the part that also adds to my anger is how the CCP has made the Chinese people act in such a clownish way. Like in this video, a mainland Chinese phone number starting with 86 calls a Japanese restaurant constantly. And so a reporter calls back asking what they do and why they called the shop.
履歴に残った番号に電話してみました。
啊，喂，请问，你为什么给日本的拉面店的店主打电话呢？
我说我让他把核废水拿去煮面，他不听招呼。
您是怎么知道他的电话号码的呢？
这个你就不要打听了。
您是工作的还是学生呢？
社会闲散人员。
您大概多少岁啊？
我大概23了。
那您觉得有用吗？这样打电话？
有用啊。
您不觉得这是给平常的一个人造成一种不便吗？
哎呀，他排核废水，他还有瘾了。
但是日本现在这个電話切れました。
Here's another one as a group of reporters wait for a Chinese phone call.
你是脑残吗？你为什么要把核废水排到海里？傻逼吧？
あなたたちは頭が悪いよ。中国に核汚染水を流して。あなたたちはろくな死に方をしないように呪ってやる。
这是故意的，整个网络都会这样的，正常。
你们这个電話
番号は別の人から教えてもらった？
そうです。他の人もたくさんかけるでしょ。
年齢を聞いてもいいですか
？16歳。
Not only that, there's crazy reactions in China too. This man owns a Japanese restaurant in China. He filmed himself tearing down the entire restaurant, citing nationalism. This is the most insane reaction I've ever seen. I mean, why would you start a Japanese restaurant in the first place if you're somehow suddenly so patriotic? Do you know how Japanese people reacted when China was having the COVID outbreak? This is a 14-year-old girl. She's been standing outside with a donation box for Wuhan, giving 90-degree bows to every donor. But the CCP hasn't condemned any of these so-called nationalistic behaviors. Here's another one, a guy calling in.
もしもし。你弟为什么排核废水？日本語でないとわかんないですよ。操你！为什么排核废水？别。バーベキューですよ，ここはバーベキューが会ですよ。小八嘎！你操！等着吃。
And in fact, not only has the Japanese fishing industry not been affected, China's own fishing markets are now empty. And this didn't start today. This constant brainwashing, like I said, starts very, very young. They actively train the kids in China to promote Japan as the number 2 enemy. Of course, the US is always number 1. When in fact, Mao Zedong even thanked the Japanese delegation for their invasion during World War II. He says, quote, "It is precisely because the Japanese Imperial Army occupied most of China that we established many anti-Japanese base areas and created the conditions for victory in the subsequent War of Liberation. If I need to thank, I would like to thank the Japanese Imperial Army for invading China." In other words, without the Japanese invasion, there wouldn't be a CCP regime, and Mao thanks them for that. And this hasn't stopped the propaganda from turning the opposite, right? Hating Japan. A Japanese friend I spoke with on the phone told me that Japan's perception of China has never been this bad until what's happening now. And so the question is, why would the CCP do this? Well, multiple reasons. First, divert attention from its internal political trouble. Turn destabilizing factors from within the party toward outside forces like Japan. Using external forces to justify the reason why China is doing so badly. It's not because of the CCP, but foreign trouble. Go look somewhere else. An article published by CCP mouthpiece The Global Times calls for Britain to return the artifacts they took from China. Now, it's the same idea. Blame the British for invading China. Blame the Japanese for invading China. Look, as much as I would like to have all the amazing Chinese artifacts go to museums in China, I don't think we should. Do you know how many vases, temples, buildings, architectures, and traditional scriptures the CCP burned, smashed, broke, tossed, and trampled in the Cultural Revolution? The scale will be like 10 to 100 times more than the artifacts sitting at the Met or British Museum. So no, don't return anything to China today, because it's going to get smashed and broken. And the second reason is the narrative war. China can never be the loser in an argument. Succumbing to Japan's water release as up to standard destroys the image of the CCP and its years-long propaganda against Japan. So they just have to maintain the stance that no matter what, no matter how irrational it may be, that Japan is always in the wrong. And this has backfired, right? Not only have people started to look at China's nuclear waste numbers, instead, their own fishing industry has been destroyed. That's not what the intended purpose was. And the third reason is a Chinese idiom called wu li qu nao, which means make trouble without reason or grounds to do so. Or as I like to call it, a child tantrum. It's basically the CCP twisting logic and rationality, intentionally making up things that just aren't true. The child tantrum from the CCP comes from the communist ideology itself, using extreme and sometimes foolish thinkings to justify how things work in the world. Like workers must rise up against the rich owners. Sure, but without the rich owners, where would there be businesses for you to work in? How would factories be formed? How would the workers create production? Or in the case of Japan, when asked why Chinese people are harassing Japanese places, they say that is because Japanese people are harassing Chinese people first. So they must protest before the Japanese protests. But what? I haven't seen a single video of Japanese people calling Chinese people, but I've so far seen many of Chinese people harassing the Japanese. So it's all illogical. They just don't care though. All right, that's it today for our topic on why Japan is becoming another wave of nationalistic feelings in China. And if you enjoy the content, leave a like, comment below your thoughts on this topic, and as well as always, subscribe to our channel. All right, I'm David Zhang. This is China Insider. We'll see you next time.